4:22 a.m. The Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Iraqi desert share the same pre-dawn darkness. In three separate geographic theaters separated by more than 2,000 kilometers of airspace, three different military organizations are preparing to execute what they believe is a coordinated opening sequence. The Iranian Joint Operations Center had designated the plan in its internal communications as a multi-vector convergence operation. 14 months of coordination between the IRGC, the Houthi Missile and Drone Directorate in Yemen, and the Kataib network in western Iraq. The premise was precise in its logic. The United States military in the Middle East was a distributed force that depended on a single integrated air defense network. That network was formidable against a single vector operation. Against three simultaneous vectors from three separate geographic directions, the calculation was different. The Aegis ships in the Persian Gulf could not simultaneously engage Iranian ballistic missiles inbound from the northeast and Yemeni anti-ship systems approaching from the southwest. The Patriot batteries at Al-Udeid would be processing Iranian ballistic tracks while drone swarms from Iraq approached al-Assad from the northwest. The electromagnetic spectrum that Aegis radar used for ballistic missile defense would be contested from three directions simultaneously. The logic was not wrong. It was the most sophisticated adversary coordination analysis CENTCOM had encountered in 2 decades of regional operations. The flaw was not in the logic. The flaw was in the assumption that three separate organizations operating on different communications architectures under different command authorities in 3 different countries would execute with the timing precision the plan required. It would not. But at 4:22:11 a.m., that coordination failure was not yet visible. The Iranian vector was scheduled to launch at 4:22 a.m. The Yemeni vector was scheduled to launch at 4:21 a.m. The Iraqi vector was scheduled to launch at 4:23 a.m. The 1-minute stagger was designed to ensure simultaneous arrival on target, accounting for the different ranges involved. The Kataib drones needed the extra minute because their 185-kilometer approach at 185 kilometers per hour meant they required 60 minutes of flight time. The Burkan 3 ballistic missiles from Yemen needed approximately 12 minutes. The Iranian Fateh 313s needed 9 minutes. The timing had been calculated to place all 3 threat profiles in their respective terminal engagement phases at the same moment, creating the maximum simultaneity stress on the defensive network. What the Kataib planners did not know at the moment of launch was that the Iranian vector had launched 67 seconds late due to a communication confirmation delay at one of the Zagros launch complexes. 67 seconds translated to a 3.4-kilometer difference in the Fateh 313 arrival timing. The simultaneity that the plan required was already fractured before the first missile left the ground. What was visible to the space-based infrared system satellite in geosynchronous orbit over the Middle East was 67 simultaneous thermal signatures in the Zagros mountain corridor, Fateh 313 solid-fuel ballistic missiles, and Hovizeh cruise missiles beginning trajectories toward Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar and Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE. 40 seconds later, the SBIRS constellation's secondary coverage over the Red Sea registered additional signatures from the Yemeni coastal highlands. A mix of Burkan 3 ballistic missile launches and mass drone launch events. And at 4:23:08 a.m., ground-based radar at Ain al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq registered the first returns of an airborne swarm approaching from the Syrian border at 185 meters altitude, moving at 185 kilometers per hour. 3 vectors, 3 theaters, 1 60-second window. The SBIRS analyst covering the Middle East sector had been monitoring Iranian exercise patterns for 6 days. At 4:22:17 a.m., 6 seconds after first Iranian detection, her console showed the Zagros cluster. She had processed Iranian exercise launches before. This trajectory geometry was not a test range profile. She initiated the alert while simultaneously flagging the Red Sea secondary signatures on her adjacent display. 2 alerts in 11 seconds. The protocol said sequential. She issued them in parallel. Her supervisor would note in the after-action debrief that the parallel alert was outside procedure. He would also note that it was correct. The data reached CENTCOM and NAVCENT simultaneously at 4:22:31 a.m. Multi-vector coordinated engagement sequence, designated Convergence Event Alpha. The response architecture that activated in the following 90 seconds had been rehearsed for a multi-vector simultaneous scenario twice in the preceding 18 months. The central insight from those rehearsals: a single command node could not defend 3 separate theaters without pre-delegating engagement authority to individual theater commanders. That pre-delegation had been authorized under a standing operational order on the books for 11 months. It activated at 4:22:35 a.m. 4 seconds after the CENTCOM alert, 3 separate defensive operations began in parallel. Not one machine. 3 machines, networked, each with authority to act independently within its assigned envelope. In the Persian Gulf, the Iranian vector carried 67 missiles. Smaller in volume than the Zagros Gambit scenario that CENTCOM planners had modeled repeatedly, but complex in its mix of ballistic and cruise profiles. The Aegis ships holding position in the northern Gulf, USS Porter and USS Gravely, had been at heightened watch for 48 hours following intelligence indicators that had been partially correct. SM-3 Block 2. A interceptors launched against the Fateh 313 ballistic tracks at 4:24:18 a.m. THAAD Battery Kilo 4 at Al Dhafra engaged the mid-tier ballistic tracks from 4:25:02 a.m. Patriot PAC-3 batteries handled the Hoveyza cruise profiles in the terminal phase. Of 67 Iranian missiles, 61 were intercepted across the 3 defense layers. 6 entered terminal engagement range. 4 were neutralized by PAC-3. 2 reached the base perimeter CRAM. The CRAM system at Al-Udeid engaged both remaining tracks at 4:29:44 a.m. 1 was neutralized at 900 meters altitude. 1 impacted the northeastern taxiway at 4:29:51 a.m. Surface damage, no personnel losses, runway operationally functional. In the Red Sea, the Yemeni vector presented a categorically different defensive problem. The Birkin 3 ballistic missiles were trackable and manageable within the Aegis capability of USS Eisenhower's screen. USS Monterey and USS Mason engaged 6 Birkin 3 tracks with SM-2 and SM-6 between 4:24:50 and 4:28:11 a.m. All 6 were intercepted. The drone component was harder. 43 Shahed 136 one-way systems dispersed across a 60-kilometer front, flying at terrain following altitude, did not present the radar return profile that Aegis was designed to prioritize. Each Shahed 136 airframe cost approximately $20,000. Each SM-2 interceptor costs $410,000. 43 drones represented an $860,000 adversary investment requiring a potential $17.6 million SM-2 response. The USS Eisenhower's defensive coordinator did not engage the drone swarm with SM-2. She allocated CRAM and CIWS to the drone profile and held SM-2 inventory for the next ballistic track. 31 of 43 drones were intercepted by CRAM and CIWS between 4:26 and 4:31 a.m. 12 continued past the screen destroyer's engagement envelope. 7 were intercepted by the destroyer's close-in systems. 3 reached the carrier's 5-mile defensive ring. 2 were neutralized by CRAM at close range. 1 impacted the portside flight deck catwalk at 4:32:18 a.m., producing a localized structural failure and a minor thermal event in the maintenance equipment stored below. Fire suppression activated within 4 seconds. The catwalk section was non-operational. The flight deck was undamaged. Flight operations were suspended for 11 minutes during the damage assessment, then resumed. In western Iraq, the Kataib vector was the most numerically concentrated drone operation U.S. forces had encountered in the region. al-Assad Air Base had been targeted by Kataib rocket operations 7 times in the preceding 2 years. None of those operations had involved 61 Shahed 136 airframes launched from 3 separate positions in the Anbar Desert, timed to converge on the installation from 3 different approach vectors simultaneously. The CRAM system at Ain al-Assad can engage approaching targets at 4,500 rounds per minute. Against a single incoming track, it is a reliable terminal defense layer. Against 61 simultaneous tracks converging from 3 vectors, the engagement geometry degrades significantly. The fire control system prioritizes by closing rate and estimated impact point. 44 of the 61 drones fell within the CRAM's coverage envelope. 17 were approaching at angles that placed them in the gap between the installation's 2 CRAM positions, a coverage limitation the Kataib planners had identified through 11 months of observing the base's defensive response patterns during earlier, smaller operations. 38 of 44 in-envelope drones were intercepted between 4:25:07 and 4:28:44 a.m. 6 from the in-envelope group and all 17 from the gap approach group reached the installation perimeter. 9 impacted within the base footprint. A maintenance hangar sustained structural damage from 2 near-simultaneous impacts. The base fuel storage facility at the northern perimeter received a single drone impact that produced a thermal event, contained by the fire suppression team within 14 minutes. 6 personnel sustained injuries across the 2 impact areas. Ain al-Assad's runway remained operational. Its aircraft had been dispersed to alternate fields 48 hours earlier following the same intelligence indicators that had put the Gulf on heightened watch. By minute 18, the United States had expended $2.1 billion in interceptor and defensive ordnance inventory across 3 separate theaters. The economic asymmetry of the drone component defined the opening phase's character. The Shahed swarms had cost the Houthi and Kataib organizations approximately $2.1 million combined in airframe procurement. The U.S. defensive response to the drone component alone had consumed $340 million in CRAM, CIWS rounds, and SM-2 ordnance, a ratio of 162-1 in the adversary's favor on the drone exchange. It was the economic logic that had driven 2 years of Iranian drone export investment across the region. The logic was sound. It did not account for what was already in motion. Operation IRON Convergence had been authorized at 4:23:40 a.m., 78 seconds after first detection. The targeting architecture for a multi-vector coordinated response had been maintained at CENTCOM for 16 months. 3 parallel targeting packages, Persian Gulf, Red Sea/Yemen, and Iraq, pre-built, pre-matched, activating simultaneously under a single authorization. In the 16 minutes between that authorization and the first Tomahawk impacts at 4:39 a.m., 312 aim points had been assigned across 94 separate adversary installations and mobile system positions spanning 3 countries. Each aim point had been matched to a specific ordnance type based on target hardness, access geometry, and collateral distance requirements. The scale of the response architecture was visible in the numbers. In the 16 minutes between Operation IRON Convergence authorization at 4:23:40 a.m. and the first Tomahawk impacts at 4:39 a.m., 312 aim points had been assigned across 94 adversary installations and mobile system positions spanning Iran, Yemen, and Iraq. Each aim point had been matched to a specific ordnance type based on target hardness, access geometry, and collateral distance requirements. The CAOC was simultaneously processing 3 separate theater strike packages, each with its own weapons inventory, launch timing, and deconfliction requirements as one coordinated sequence. No individual component of that sequence knew the full picture. The CAOC knew the full picture. That asymmetry between what the adversary saw and what the U.S. command architecture saw was not an accident. It was the product of 15 years of investment in joint command and control systems that adversary intelligence had consistently underestimated. In the Gulf, EA-18G Growlers from Al Dhafra began jamming operations against the IRGC's radar network at 4:26 a.m. Tomahawk missiles from USS Porter and USS Gravely launched in sequenced salvos from 4:27 a.m. carrying preloaded coordinates for IRGC missile support infrastructure in the Zagros corridor. B-1B Lancers already airborne over the northern Arabian Sea received targeting packages at 4:29 a.m. 2 aircraft, 48 JASSM-ER precision ordnance rounds, each at $1.36 million, converging on Iranian military infrastructure by 4:31 a.m. That was $65.3 million of precision capability in flight before the last Iranian missile had completed its terminal phase. By minute 22, the United States had committed $1.4 billion in counter-operation ordnance across all three theaters combined. The running invoice was accelerating at approximately $190 million per 6-minute cycle. In Yemen, the Houthi launch infrastructure presented a distribution problem. The ballistic missile and drone architecture had been dispersed across the western Yemeni highlands over 4 years. Buried in cave complexes supported by mobile logistics chains operating at night. 47 catalogued launch sites, maintenance facilities, and coordination nodes, each with a Tomahawk or JASSM-ER package matched to estimated hardness. The hardened cave facilities required penetrating ordnance that only B-2 delivered GBU. 57 massive ordnance penetrators could reliably reach. 2 B-2 Spirit aircraft from Diego Garcia, airborne since 11 p.m., were released to Yemen ingress corridors at 4:31 a.m. The B-2s carried a primary ordnance load of 4 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators each, 8 total for the hardest underground targets in the Yemeni highlands, and a secondary load of GBU-31 JDAM for the surface-accessible facilities. The weapon-to-target matching had been built over 7 months of target development, incorporating satellite synthetic aperture radar data to estimate construction depth and material at each facility. The GBU-57 penetrates 60 meters of medium-density rock before detonation. The hardest facilities in the Sada target set were assessed at 40 to 45 meters depth. The margin was not comfortable, but it was sufficient. The Houthi Directorate had anticipated some level of counter-operation against launch infrastructure. They had not anticipated simultaneous engagement of all 47 catalogued sites within a single 32-minute window. B-2S, 5SSN Tomahawk salvos from the Red Sea, and 2 B-1B JASSM-ER packages executing in precise time on target sequencing. The sequencing ensured that outlying facility engagements did not alert the central coordination node before that node's assigned ordnance arrived. The Sada coordination facility received its GBU-57 at 5:04 a.m., 11 minutes after the outlying sites were engaged. Exactly as planned. In Iraq, the Kataib network presented the softest target profile of the 3 vectors. Launch positions were mobile, trucks repositioned immediately after the drone salvo. But the command facilities that coordinated the swarm's timing were semi-fixed infrastructure under surveillance for 7 months. F-16s from Balad Air Base engaged 4 Kataib coordination facilities with GBU-38 JDAM between 4:34 and 4:41 a.m. An MQ-9 maintaining persistent surveillance over the Anbar launch area acquired 3 mobile launch trucks during post-launch repositioning at 4:36 a.m. 2 were rendered non-operational by AGM-114 Hellfire Ordnance. 1 completed its repositioning before acquisition. At 4:44 a.m., the adversary coordination network showed the first visible fragmentation. The IRGC's Gulf Command node at Bandar Abbas had lost radar coverage across its western sector following Growler jamming. The Houthi directorate's primary satellite uplink was severed by a U.S. cybercom operation using pre-positioned access established 9 months earlier. The Kataib network in western Iraq was transmitting on open frequencies, its encrypted communication system disrupted by electronic warfare from a rivet joint orbiting over the Saudi-Iraqi border. 3 organizations that had spent 14 months coordinating their opening sequence were each now operating without knowledge of what the others were doing or experiencing. It was at this moment that the IRGC attempted its reserve move. 8 Fateh 110 ballistic missiles had been held back from the opening salvo. A reserve on mobile TELs in Fars province positioned at the outer range margin for Al Dhafra. The IRGC commander had calculated correctly that after the opening salvo, the Patriot battery at Al Dhafra would be at reduced ready-load capacity. He was right. The battery had expended 61% of its interceptors on the opening salvo engagement. The reserve Fateh 110 salvo launched at 4:47 a.m. Time to arrive when the battery was deepest into its reload cycle. At 4:47 a.m., Al Dhafra's battery was at 40% reload completion. 4 interceptors available against 8 inbound tracks. The Aegis network compensated in real time. USS Porter repositioning northward in the Gulf since the opening engagement was within SM-6 range of the Fateh 110 profiles. 4 tracks assigned to USS Porter SM-6. 4 to the partially reloaded Al Dhafra battery. USS Porter achieved 3 intercepts. 1 Fateh 110 continued to PAC-3 range. Al Dhafra achieved 3 intercepts. 1 Fateh 110 continued to CIWS range. CIWS neutralized it at 1.1 kilometers altitude. USS Porter's SM-6 inventory stood at 22% capacity. The CAOC noted the depletion and began routing final Tomahawk salvos away from any targeting requiring Porter's engagement support. The IRGC's reserve had been expended. No second reserve existed. The IRGC had bet its withheld capacity on a defensive gap that the networked Aegis architecture had closed in real time. Using a ship that the IRGC's intelligence assessment had placed 30 kilometers further south than its actual position. By 5:09 a.m., the primary counter-operation phase across all 3 theaters was reaching completion. The Iranian target set, 31 missile support facilities in the Zagros corridor engaged, 19 confirmed neutralized, 12 assessed as structurally degraded. IRGC coastal radar coverage, reduced by 73%. IRGC Gulf Coordination Network, non-functional as a coherent system. The Yemeni target set, 42 of 47 catalogued sites engaged, 34 confirmed neutralized. SADA Directorate Facility non-operational. Houthi ballistic and drone coordination, assessed as degraded beyond immediate regeneration. The Iraqi target set, 4 Kataib coordination facilities non-operational. 3 mobile launch systems non-operational. Kataib's second wave capacity degraded for a minimum of 72 hours. Time from first spurs detection to completion of IRON convergence primary phase, 49 minutes. Total adversary ordnance committed across all 3 vectors, 177 systems. Intercepted or neutralized before significant impact, 153. Rate, 86.4%. Adversary systems that produced military effect, 24. U.S. installations with operational impact, 3. U.S. personnel injuries, 6 total across all theaters. U.S. aircraft lost, 0. USS Porter VLS at 22%. USS Eisenhower catwalk non-operational, flight deck functional. al-Assad fuel facility operational within 14 hours. Udeid and Al Dhafra runways operational throughout. Adversary installations engaged, 88 of 94 catalogued across 3 countries. Confirmed neutralization, 66. Counter-operation ordnance expended $2.8 billion. total adversary investment in the coordinated operation estimated $340 million across all three organizations. Exchange ratio 1 to 8.2 in America's favor by ordnance value. The drone exchange ratio 162 to 1 in the adversary's favor by unit cost. Both numbers were accurate. Neither number was the whole picture. The whole picture was this: a coordinated multi-vector three-theater simultaneous operation, 14 months in preparation, executed across 3 countries and 2 seas, had been detected in seconds, distributed to 3 defensive commands in minutes, absorbed across all 3 theaters without any single layer being overwhelmed to the point of failure, and answered with a counter-operation that was already in operational delivery before the last adversary system reached its target. The coordination that 3 organizations had assembled over 14 months had been fragmented within 49 minutes. The adversary's drone economics were rational. The adversary's strategic mathematics were not. The capacity to absorb and respond had been demonstrated at scale across 3 simultaneous vectors in under an hour. The adversary had committed everything it had coordinated across 3 countries. The system processed it, answered it, and produced an assessment. The assessment was 12 pages and classified at the highest level. The message it contained was not complicated. It did not require 14 months to understand. It required 49 minutes to demonstrate.